chasing that red ball. Radio low, neighbor makes a roll call. From Cody to Cheyenne, voices in the same key. These are our fences, this is our country. Not left, not right, just living how we pray. We're the ones who stay. Wyoming stands tall, we don't bow, we don't crawl. We're the ones they can't control. From some distant marble hall, from the mountains to the plains, through the blizzards, through the rain, we the people draw the line, take our freedom back again. Wyoming stands tall. Mama at the sink laughs, wipes off her wet hands, phones on the table, talk of new plans. Granddad at the counter, map spread like a quilt, lines tracing fences that our great-grandmothers built. Caravans of ranch trucks rolling in a long line, county fairground fields, hearts beating in time. Not red, not blue, just a homegrown crew saying we remember who this belongs to. Wyoming stands tall, we don't bow, we don't crawl. We're the ones they can't control. From some distant marble hall, from the mountains to the plains, through the blizzards, through the rain, we the people draw the line, take our freedom back again. Wyoming stands tall. No more talking heads telling us what we meant when we send our money, when we cast our consent. We are more than numbers on a screen back east, with the hands in the harvest, the faith and the feast. Hey, hey, family side by side. Hey, hey, we decide. Hey, hey, listen DC, you work for us, you work for me. Wyoming stands tall, Wyoming stands tall, Wyoming stands tall. Sun just clocked out on the fence line, boots kick dust off a long week's try. Hayfield shimmer in the porch like glow, Gramps cracks a joke, says it's our time. Cooler in the bed of that old Ford dog, riding shotgun like he runs this world. County road hums while the day unwinds, chasing that sunset red as a stop sign. All that sweat on Monday, Tuesday turns to stories when it turns dark. We've been counting down the long days to light up this one spark. We were raised on Friday nights where the small town comes alive. Campfires popping, someone's tail.
Beyond the fence line, where we step past the headlines and into the truth. This show isn't about left or right, it's about what's real in Wyoming, across the country, and around the world. No spin, no talking points, just facts, context, and honest conversation. If you're tired of being managed instead of informed, you're in the right place. Let's go beyond the fence line. And now, here is your host, Joseph Kibler, candidate for Wyoming Governor in 2026. Welcome to Wyoming Beyond the Fence Line.
Hey, good morning. Ooh, I got a little frog in my throat this morning. Happy Wednesday. Hope you guys are doing well. I think we're all recovering from the State of the Union address last night a little bit. I'm actually not as prepared for this morning's show as I would like to be because there was a lot to unpack in the State of the Union address last night. Overall, I think Trump did what he needed to do from a practical standpoint. I thought it was a good speech. We heard a lot of I guess you could say, the same talking points or ideas that we've heard, from him on the campaign trail and stuff like that. And we've even seen Congress actually deny some of those ideas recently with legislation, with the passing of the budget bills and things like that. But we're going to dig into the State of the Union address a little bit this morning. And, let's give a little credit where credit is due. We've got some things this morning that we're definitely going to celebrate. There are some things that we'll talk about this morning that would be nice, right? But we'll see what happens. Trump can only accomplish so much via executive order. At some point, Congress has got to codify a lot of those things, put some of those things into action. Some of these ideas sound good on paper, but they're flawed in many ways. Don't expect perfection from our leader. So today, we're going to talk about things that we can celebrate, ideas that maybe we'll see what happens. But we're also going to delve into what is the truth on some of these things. You guys, I was having a conversation with a friend the other night, and they were saying, well, Joseph, it's not that Trump doesn't tell the truth. He exaggerates a lot. Well, one could argue that exaggerating is also perhaps not telling the whole truth or kind of leaving out certain parts of the truth. And I think, one of the things that's important as we move forward into this election year, this midterm, and, what I'm doing and focused on as a campaign and stuff is I'm going to tell you the way I see it, the way I see the truth, whether it's popular or not, whether it's politically costly or not. I think there are things that we have to talk about. What is the truth, about the stock markets or the inflation or the warrior dividends or the tariffs or job growth or $18 trillion in investments? What is the truth about these things? I think it's important that we talk about the truth in the issues, regardless of political consequence. I think we've got to do it, right? We've got to have the conversation. And yeah, it's not always comfortable. It's not always fun. It's not always great to say, hey, maybe Trump got this wrong. Or Trump got that right, things like that. But we've got to do it. He's our free leader. We should have the opportunity to do that. So let's dive into the State of the Union address. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about the Epstein files and Iran today, Mexican cartel, just a few quick highlights in U.S. and world news as well. I was come out, first of all, starting out by saying, I voted for Trump 3 times. Given the options we've had, I would do it again, if I'm being honest. And sometimes I might say, well, choosing the lesser of 2 evils, if you will. And that's kind of a cliche thing to say. It's like, well, Joseph, maybe you shouldn't vote at all. No, we got to vote. Our voice has got to be heard, right? And you've got to, you pick what you think is the best option that we have out there when we vote. And that goes with all of our elections here in Wyoming or our national elections as well. And so even though I would do that, doesn't mean I have to follow him lock, stock, and barrel. It doesn't make him my God. I mean, I don't worship Trump. I don't think that Trump's perfect. I don't expect him to be perfect. I cannot even pretend to be in his shoes. I don't know what he deals with day to day. Most of us do not. I do want to encourage us, though. If anything we could do for our leaders, including our president, was we need to pray for them. We need to make sure that we're praying for them, for their protection, for their wisdom, that God would give them wisdom beyond themselves. So here are my overall thoughts on the address. What I heard last night was a lot of the same things we heard on the campaign trail, a lot of promises. And some of those promises have been kept, no doubt. I do agree with Trump. He mentioned last night, he kind of started out with the big win with having a secure border. No illegals have been admitted to the U.S. Yes, border crossings are down 75% as of today, compared to a year ago. And that's great. And then everyone else is being detained and turned around, which I think is wonderful. That's a great win for Americans. Why is that a great win? For a couple of reasons. Well, he mentioned that drugs are down, that murder is down, that violent crime is down. This will also, it should in turn, if we can continue to keep the border under control, we can continue to deport those deport those that don't belong here. That should, in theory, start to lower costs for things. Costs for housing, costs for groceries, costs for healthcare, because the system is no longer burdened by people on all of this welfare or government handouts or free care and what have you. And so it should have a long-term effect of a benefit to Americans. And so Trump nailed it on that issue last night. I think we're headed in the right direction on those issues. And this stuff can't get done overnight. But I'm happy, I'm satisfied with where we're at when it comes to how we're dealing with illegal immigration, and especially those who shouldn't be in this country or taking advantage of our systems. We're making progress in those areas. And there's no doubt we should give credit there for his leadership and the people around him who are doing this job. We should give credit there. Gas prices are down. It's funny because if you guys look over the last decade, no matter what president we have, if gas prices are up, we blame the president. If gas prices are down, we give the president credit. And yet throughout all of that, we've always been told the president's policies don't affect gas prices. So I'm just going to leave that with you guys. Do presidential policies actually affect gas prices? I think they can in some ways, such as permitting, and energy expansion, economy, things like that. But we've always heard, well, it doesn't really, presidents don't affect gas prices. Well, in a lot of ways that's true. And so you really have to look at the economics of it to go, well, okay, yes, some policy things and policy decisions can affect gas prices, but overall you got to look at the market, because OPEC, affects gas prices, and the global oil cartel, in a sense, affects gas prices and what goes on with that. And I had even heard from an economist a couple of weeks ago that actually the reason we have low gas prices right now is because we're in a recession without calling it a recession. So, that's kind of interesting too, right, you guys? So, but nonetheless, nice to see some things coming down, and perhaps in the long term, those lower gas prices will lower costs of goods. We will see, right, guys? Because for most of us, we've seen the cost of goods not really going down that much. But we'll see what happens. Trump talked about DEI. He talked about making sure that states or schools, organizations could not transition children. We must protect children. We must, without parents' consent and things like that. I think those are all great things. And hopefully Congress will codify some of that stuff. And I'll be honest, I am not confident, and we're going to talk about a lot of things today. I'm not confident that Congress is motivated to codify a lot of what Trump wants to do. Now, some of these things I think would be good for Americans. Others of these things, maybe not so much. When you look under the hood and you look at the truth, you have to kind of ask yourself the question, is this what's good and right for America? Is this, we've kind of redefined some of these terms like socialism and communism and things like this. And what is conservatism? Fiscal conservatism, does it even exist anymore? I think it does in a very few of our representatives in Washington. But I think the rest of conservatives, Republicans in Washington, have kind of given up on the idea of smaller government. I really do. And while the federal government has gotten rid of a lot of workforce, supposedly in the last year, and things like that, government is still growing at an alarming pace. And they're not making it smaller. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. So let's talk about a whole bunch of ideas that Trump presented last night. These are ideas that he has presented on the campaign trail. We're going to dig through these. Is it the truth? We're going to ask the question, is it the truth? Maybe it's partially true, or maybe it's not true at all. And let's just take it at face value. Trump has talked a lot about replacing income tax with tariffs. I've always said that, if you wanted to have tariffs, you have to get rid of income taxes. That's one thing I've always said. And the reason for that is because tariffs are, whether we like it or not, and you know what, and you can deny it all you want, tariffs are an indirect tax on consumers. Bottom line is that consumers bear at least 90% of the cost of tariffs. Why? Because corporations are not generous. Corporations are going to pass that cost to you, the consumer. That's just a fact. Whether you like it or not, that's just a fact. But now, if tariffs actually did replace income tax, I think that's an interesting idea. I think that would be a very good idea for America, for Americans. I like choice based tax. I think it's a good idea. Choice based tax really does allow us to control what we spend on, things like that. But you need to look at the actual tariff numbers and the actual income tax numbers. There's no way those numbers are even close. If you look at our actual trade deficit, it's almost unchanged. Yes, there's been some impact to trade deficit with the tariffs, but we have to ask how and why in order to understand it. And so the idea of replacing income tax with tariffs, not a bad idea. Can it be done? I think that's a whole other ball of wax. You would have to raise tariffs enormously to counteract, to replace income tax. And you'd also have to shrink government in order to do that as well. And so that's kind of the tariffs thing. Personally, we're having the battle right now. The Supreme Court shot Trump's tariffs down in a ruling of basically 2/3 agreed that Trump could not do tariffs. That's a job of Congress. And then Trump reenacted other tariffs in just a different way using some different statutes. We don't know really where that is going to end up from a practical standpoint, but it is causing economic turmoil back and forth and up and down for retailers, for consumers. And it's kind of a challenging thing, I think, to unpack. I don't think tariffs, the way that we're being done, are going to benefit Americans greatly. In fact, it's hurting Americans. And you know what? You might say, I might go, well, okay, so you're going to get, whatever you get back, the extra money you get back on your tax return this year or whatnot, that really might replace what tariffs cost you last year. I mean, that might be, sort of just a replacement. But there's not enough money coming in from tariffs to give warrior dividends out, well, there is, but that's not what got used. And I'll talk about that in a minute. There's not enough money coming in from tariffs, trillions of dollars. Although Trump talks about leveraging tariffs to bring manufacturing, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Mortgage costs are going down a little bit, so are home prices. That's true. Those things are going down. If interest rates go down as well, that could be good for the market. But Trump mentions that he wants to keep home prices high while still somehow making it affordable for new home buyers. I don't think you can have both. And at some point, the bubble's got to burst, you guys. So right now, what's happening with the market is we are corporate backstopping. The U.S. government's corporately backstopping banks and mortgage securities and investments for quantitative easing and tightening. Billions and billions of dollars going into the back doors. For instance, Trump bought $200 billion in mortgage securities, mortgage bonds about 4 or 5 weeks ago, backstopping the market from collapsing. I think we have to be careful about that because I think we're in a big bubble right now. I think a lot of us know that. If we keep increasing the size of the bubble, at some point, anything done from a policy standpoint will be completely ineffective and the bubble will burst at some point. So we need to consider that. We'll see what happens. Nice to have. Will lower interest rates help? Yes, they will. Are we going to get lower interest rates? Well, we haven't seen it yet. So let's see what happens. Trump mentioned last night that we have $18 trillion coming to America and that factories and investments are coming back to America in the trillions. And while we have some verbal commitments to some of those things, I think we should caution ourselves to throw out these numbers because they haven't materialized yet. It's kind of like counting your eggs before they're hatched, your eggs before they're hatched, whatever that saying is, right? A lot of this stuff that Trump did say last night might be kind of pie in the sky because it's not happened yet, right? It's not realized yet. And until we know that it's going to happen, it's sort of this idea of unrealized gain, or we think this is going to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. I think we need to be careful about how much we talk about, $18 trillion in U.S. investment, or talk about factory jobs roaring back in America and things like this when it's actually not happening, or it hasn't happened yet. We need to be really, really careful about that, I think. because those things are based on what we hope will happen, not what is happening. And I think it's important. I think one of the things that Trump does do a lot is he talks a lot about what he hopes will happen or what he wants to happen. But in reality, and or on Main Street, that's not what's actually happening right now today. He talked about enormous job growth and economic growth last night. And unfortunately, if you look at the numbers for 2025, that is simply not the case. Now, maybe I believe that perhaps he hopes that's happening. But the US job market gained almost no jobs last year. I shouldn't say almost no jobs, but comparatively speaking, the job market last year was in very, very, very rough shape, and it still is. Uh, we lost a lot of jobs last year. Here in Wyoming, we lost a lot of jobs in Wyoming. I think we lost 30,000 jobs in Wyoming last year and only gained 15,000. So we've got a real problem across this country with jobs and employment and work. Heck, I can even somewhat relate to that in my own company, my own business. Like, things are not what they used to be. Things are hard. So I think that Trump needs to be careful about separating what he hopes is happening or what he hopes will happen from what the truth is and what reality is. Because the bottom line is that these things are not going like, a lot of these things are not going like he says they're going, or they're slightly different. It's partially true. And we have to be really careful with that. We love this idea of giving health care back to the people, but guess what? Congress didn't want to do it, you guys. Congress already denied that a couple of weeks ago when they passed the budget and when they did everything they were going to do. Congress has already denied this giving health care back to the people idea. They're not motivated to do it. So that's something interesting to talk about. The other thing to think about, and maybe I'll circle back around to manufacturing right now. Manufacturing actually lost between 68,000 and 75,000 jobs last year. Manufacturing bled out last year. And part of that, and a lot of people on Main Street are saying that was directly because of tariffs. It caused a lot of problems in manufacturing because they could not get the goods that they needed at the price that they needed. So these facts kind of matter, you guys. We take it as it is. Trump did announce last night that J.D. Vance is going to be in charge of chasing after government fraud. But I asked the question, whatever happened to Doge? Whatever happened to that? I think we kind of have political short-term memory because so much is going on in the world. Doge was actually, brought down by Republicans in Congress and by Trump. They didn't want to do it. I think they only codified one change from Doge. And really the only reason we're having the Minnesota conversation is because of Nick and his independent journalist video that he made. We weren't going after the fraud at all, or not very much, until that independent video was made. And it's like, oh my gosh, we have to take care of this. I wonder how motivated Congress is to take care of this issue. It will be interesting to see. We've got 3 years. J.D. Vance is going to be in charge of the war on fraud. Let's see what happens. We're going to have to give it some time. Trump called on Congress to ban commercial driver's licenses from illegal aliens. I agree with that completely. I think that's a good call. I think we just need to make that happen. I mean, I would argue that needs to happen for everybody. I don't think anyone should be driving if they're not legally here in this country and they can't read our signs. Whether you're a truck driver or a car driver, I think we should talk about that. We shouldn't have people on our roads that can't read our signs. I think that's really important. That's a public safety issue, and I do believe that's the role of government. Public safety is an issue. This doesn't take away the freedom of Americans. This handles an important issue, I think. But we're talking about a lot of these issues, but Congress, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Congress is getting very little of this stuff done. And it'll be interesting to see because we got the midterms coming up. My guess is they will try to get some of this stuff done before the midterms. But it'll be interesting to see what we do get done. I think it'll be really interesting to see. Trump mentioned banning corporations from purchasing single-family homes. That has its own consequences. I agree with Glenn Beck on this issue. He talks about how what we need to do is not control the free market in these ways. What we need to do is remove the unfair, disproportionate advantages and disadvantages that have been created by government in the marketplace in the first place. You know, again, corporate backstops, tax breaks, all of these little deals that make the market unequal. The free market, it's not a free market because of the incentives and the deals that corporate buyers get versus individual buyers. If you level the playing field of risk, you don't need to ban corporations from buying single family homes because they have the same risk that you and I have. But what's happened is they get to have special set of rules that mitigates their risk. And as a result of that, and by the way, that includes your tax dollars going in their back doors and corporate backstops and all of this garbage that bureaucracy does. So I agree with Glenn Beck. Remove the unfair advantages that you give corporations. Have them play on the same risk field that you and I play on. And guess what? We solved the problem with corporations buying single family homes. He talked about the warrior dividend coming from tariffs. Unfortunately, that just simply is not the case. That actually came from an allocation from the big, beautiful bill for housing that was reallocated for the warrior dividend. So those funds were there for a purpose, and it was related to our military housing and housing. And those funds were moved to provide this warrior dividend that did not come from tariffs. In fact, I don't know of, Trump talks a lot about using tariff money for things, right, in government. I'm not sure we're really allocating any of that money to any specific purpose, and here's why. I mean, we're almost $40 trillion in debt, $40 trillion in debt, and that money technically doesn't exist. Even if it is on paper, the money doesn't technically exist when it comes to tariffs. So a lot of good things that Trump talked about yesterday. Some things that were maybe partly true, but not completely true. You know, he talked about, another thing he talked about was the record highs in the stock market, but we have to ask ourselves why. There's a lot of mechanisms driving the stock market right now. One of the big ones, whether we want to talk about this or not, one of the big ones that's driving the stock market's increase right now is these Trump accounts that are coming. I want you to think about this for a moment from an investor's standpoint, from a corporate investor standpoint. Trump and Trump accounts have promised potentially tens of billions of dollars in investment in the S&P 500 and in other stocks. Okay, so I want you to think about this for a minute. As an investor, that money is coming in. It's going to be coming in on July 5th of this year. Billions and billions and billions of dollars into these Trump's accounts. What would you do as an investor? Well, I'd invest in the stock market right now because all that money is going to be pouring in into Wall Street from you and I, from our tax dollars. And you think about it, well, look at Dell. You know, Dell, they're investing $6 billion. Well, they're really investing $6 billion in themselves. You think about it, they're investing $6 billion in Fortune 500 companies. They're literally taking their own money and investing in themselves. What I think will probably happen is we're going to see the stock market decline maybe after the midterms or perhaps after the investment on July 5th, because all that money is going to go in. And a lot of investors are going to want to pull that out. They're going to want to pull those gains out, and it's going to cause a big market adjustment. We'll see what happens. I personally think, Trump accounts are being sold as capitalism. They are not. Trump accounts are socialism or crony capitalism at best, and a giant, big Wall Street bailout. In a very creative way, by the way. But let's call it what it is, because that is what it is. He talked a little bit about, let's see, I've already covered job growth. I've already covered tariffs. He talked about inflation a little bit, not a lot. He talked about inflation. This is an interesting thing because he says that inflation is zero. we have no inflation, and things like this. It's only partially true. Inflation's not zero. We still have inflation. And inflation, by the way, is essentially unchanged from 2024 when Trump was elected. Is it a little teeny tiny bit lower? Yes, it is. No doubt. Inflation is a little bit lower than when Trump took office. But inflation was around 2.7 when Trump took office. And it's around 2.4 right now. So these massive economic policies and changes that have been made have had kind of a small impact on inflation. But we know, right? You and I living every day, we know that these things, the cost of these things is still going up. And it's going up slower than it was. But these things are still going up. And it's really, really, we're all feeling it, in a big way. There was a big announcement yesterday about American oil and gas being at all-time high because of Trump. I'm going to say this is only partly true. If you guys look at American oil and gas production in the last 6 years, even during the Biden administration, we had record production. Okay, this did not happen in the last year. Now, I will mention this. If we continue deregulating and issuing permits quicker, and a lot of the other things that we do see, we will see a boom as a result of his policies. We will see a boom. But that has not happened yet as a direct result of his policies because it's just too soon. This is a trend that has been going on for the last 5 to 10 years. Even during the Obama administration, gas and oil production was on the rise and has been all the way through at a consistent pace to this point. So I think it's important to bring it up that it's probably too soon for some of these victory laps that have been taken or that were taken at the State of the Union address. It might just be a little too soon because we don't know how some of these policies are actually going to affect things. He talked a lot about no taxes on tips and lower tax rates and things like that. No taxes on overtime. Well, if you look at the actual bill, it's actually no taxes on some tips and no taxes on some overtime. So in my idealistic world, when you say no tax on tips, that means no tax on all tips. That means no tax on all overtime. And that's what that means to me. But that's not what we have right now, not under the one big beautiful bill. There are limitations to that. There are hoops that you have to jump through. There are income requirements. So if you make a certain amount of money, you don't get to take advantage of those no tax on tips or no tax on overtime, things like that. So there's a lot of bureaucratic nuance in those claims. And in a lot of the claims that Trump makes, there's bureaucratic nuance that I think is important. Because if you say, to me, when you say no tax on overtime, that means no tax on overtime, period. But actually, I think it's only on the first 10,000 or 11,000 of overtime that you have no taxes on. So it does help a little bit. It doesn't equate to a lot, though, at the end of the day. And then, of course, you're taxed on anything above that. So, I mean, that is kind of I can't believe, wow, it's already 8 o'clock. I can't believe that. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the world, and then we'll wrap this show up. So, obviously, we had the big conflagration going on down in Mexico with the cartels. We helped with that. Sounds like it's already under control. But, yeah, we're rooting out evil in the world. Oh, and by the way, speaking of that, I wanted to mention, I do find it somewhat despicable and disparaging when the people in the chamber last night, especially the folks on the left, the Democrats, cannot stand for our veterans, for our angel families, for the good people in America. They cannot stand for that. But they will stand for criminals, for things that are not good. And I want to call that out. Call that out. What you stand for is important. whether you're on the right or the left. And when you can't stand for a veteran who's served this country because you don't like Trump, like you can't separate the two. I think it's tragic. And I think there's a deep rooted evil in some of that as well. And I do need to mention that and call that out. Kind of got sidetracked. I was going to talk about world news and then I got sidetracked back to that. But I think that's an important issue that I should mention. And I think one of the biggest problems we have in politics is we don't separate the messenger from the thing, right? So for instance, maybe you like a bill or you like an initiative or you like an idea, but because Joseph is sharing that idea or because Trump is sharing that idea, you won't support it. We have got to learn to be able to separate ourselves from the messenger and the thing so that we could do things like, you know what, they should be able to stand on principle and on ideas or stand for veterans. You may not like Trump, but you should be able to stand for that veteran. And we've gotten so divided that we can't do that. And by the way, that goes both ways, you guys. That goes both ways. We saw that go on in the Wyoming House this last week, where because the Wyoming Supreme Court, made that a ruling on abortion, members of the House didn't want to give the Supreme Court the security that they asked for. We got to move past that kind of stuff, you guys. I really think we do. B, I see your comments. So you are saying tips make people rich. No, I did not say that tips make people rich at all. But what I did say, what I was talking about is the one big beautiful bill has some nuance and some very particular criteria that you have to meet in order to get no tax on tips. 10K no tax is good. Oh, B, don't get me wrong. We'll take whatever tax breaks that we can take. That's not what I was saying, but because we say no tax on tips and no tax on overtime, what do you think? Well, you think that means no tax on tips and no tax on overtime, right? When in reality, you need to look at the fine print from our great government, and there are a whole bunch of criteria that you have to meet in order to take advantage of those things. But in addition to that, it's a limit on how much no taxes is. See, for me, I want no tax on overtime, and I want it to be on all overtime. I want no tax on tips. I want it to be actually no tax on all tips. But that's not what was done, and that's what I was trying to explain, B. Thank you for your comments. I do see your comments. That's what I was trying to explain on that issue. Is that there's nuance to it, because all we hear is the no tax on tips and no tax on overtime, when that's really only partly true when you look at what they actually did in the law or in the bill. And that's why I think it's important we have these discussions. So thank you for those comments, B. So what else is going on in the world? Well, obviously, it'd be interesting to see what happens in Iran. Are we going to attack them? Are we not? I was kind of telling my friends, I think, they're going to attack Iran, but they're going to wait till after the State of the Union address. We'll see what happens with that. I already talked about the Mexican cartels. But now, where do we go from here, you guys? We've got a few months until we go. The midterms are going to be here before we know it. What that Trump talked about last night is going to get done, and I think it'll be very. And I'm keeping this list. I made a big list of everything that Trump said last night, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what actually gets done. So, with that, I hope you guys have a beautiful and blessed Wednesday. So what's going on in the show the rest of the week? So I'll tell you what's going to happen next week first, and then I'll talk about what the rest of this week's show is going to look like. So next week, I am going to go on Monday. We're going to go back to covering the budget. I'm kind of wanting to let what's going to happen this week happen in the budget so that we can go ahead and just really talk about what's getting done in the budget. So that'll be good, and we'll talk about that on Monday. Tuesday, Thursday, I'm going to pick where I stand on a couple of topics. I have covered a lot of the topics that matter to everybody in Wyoming. I'm trying to think, what will I cover on Tuesday and Thursday, where I stand? I'll probably talk about where I stand on, maybe I'll talk more about gambling. You know what? This is what I'm on Tuesday. I'm going to talk about where I stand on gambling and the legalization of marijuana. That's what I'll talk about on Tuesday because I do get those questions a lot and I haven't done a show on that. On Thursday, I will cover, on Wednesday, I'll cover world news like usual. On Thursday, I will probably cover, on Thursday, I will cover hot topics in Wyoming and I'll cover the situation with WyoFresh, and I do plan to go to that next meeting. I will cover the situation with WyoFresh, the forced annexation, and just these power grabs that our local leaders are doing. And that's not just happening in Laramie County or in Cheyenne. It's happening across the state, these power grabs that people want to do. So I will talk about that issue. Obviously, I stand B. The short answer is I stand with WyoFresh on that. And so that'll be next week. I'll talk about those issues. So Monday will be talk about the budget. Tuesday, I'll talk about marijuana and gambling. Wednesday, I'll do world news. Thursday, I'll talk about hot news in Wyoming and where I stand on those issues. And we'll see what happens for Friday. But the rest of this week, so tomorrow I'm going to talk about my leadership style and where I stand on the role of government. So you guys will get to learn about me, what my leadership style is, and what I think government should and should not be doing. And boy, there is a big divide there, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. And then Friday, you'll get to meet my family. So we are planning on doing that. I know I've promised it for a couple of weeks, but we keep getting sick around here. One of us is sick. I've had a head cold for like a month, and it just won't go away. So that's why I'm a little nasally on the show. But we keep getting the stomach bug and stuff like that. And so anyway, hopefully on Friday, you guys we'll have some fun and we'll meet the family. I'll introduce the family to you all online. With that, we're going to wrap this show up. I'm going to pick a song here. Let's see. We're going to go ahead and pick, let's pick something. How about Sunday Skates and Roller Rinks? So this is a song that we made for our family because we love roller skating on Sundays. So I'll leave you guys with this. It's kind of a fun song. You guys have a blessed Wednesday and we'll talk soon.
Broncos in the driveway, cooler in the back. Mom's got snacks and quarters, dad's old ball cap.
5-year-old's boots untied, still outruns the sun. 9-year-old's already laughing, 12-year-old just runs.
Windows down, small town in the rear view. Radio loud, singing like we mean to. Sunday skates and roller rinks, let the world fade out. Just don't think round and round that old wood floor. We're falling less and laughing more. Hand in hand, we're holding tight, trading screens for neon lights inside. Every lap a brand new view, that's how good it does. Getting out with you.
Dad hits that rink like he's 20. Cross step, spins big grin wide. Mom's gliding by, just steady talking, teasing from the side.
5-year-old's a rocket, tagging every cone in sight. Sisters find a pack of friends, playing chasing colored light.
12-year-old loosens up in the corners.
High fives kids like he's known them all summer. Sunday skates and roller rinks, let the world fade out. Just don't think round and round that old wood floor. We're falling less and laughing more. Hand in hand, we're holding tight, trading screens for neon lights inside. Every lap a brand new view, that's the good it does. Getting out with you. skates and roller rinks, let the world fade out. Just don't think round and round that old wood floor. We're falling less and laughing more. Hand in hand, we're holding tight, trading screens for neon lights inside. Every lap a brand new view, that's the good it does. Getting out with you.
Bronco heading home at sundown. Kids asleep, feet sore, hearts light. Same time, same place next Sunday. We'll be rolling through that door, alright.